Coming up in our newscast tonight. During today's cabinet meeting, President Moon Jae-in renews his determination to focus on his three leading economic policies while emphasizing the importance of being able to acknowledge shortcomings and formulating complementary steps. Next year's national budget plan is unveiled. The 2019 budget is by far the highest spending blueprint since 2000, but it is deemed necessary to effectively deal with structural issues. Investigations into the BMW issue here in South Korea continues. This time, the Transport Ministry steps up to the plate to try and get to the bottom of the blazing incidents. News Center begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang TV's News Center. I'm Daniel Che. Welcome to our program. National Budget 2019 could see a near 10% on-year spike. The government is hopeful the extra funds will help to jumpstart the economy, weighed down by high unemployment and a widening wealth gap. Kim Ji-yeon has our top story.
South Korea's Ministry of Economy and Finance said Tuesday that it wants to actively deal with the country's structural issues and pursue expansionary fiscal measures to boost job creation as well as future innovative growth. It says government spending in 2019 will increase by nearly 10% from this year to $424.2 billion. That's the highest level since 2000, excluding 2009, when South Korea was struggling due to the aftermath of the global financial crisis. The ministry expects next year's gross income to amount to nearly $434 billion, up by some 8% from this year. Despite pursuing expansionary measures, the ministry says it's likely to have a limited impact on South Korea's fiscal balance and government debt due to improvements in the country's tax revenue, which the government tallied at nearly $15 billion in June.
Following increases in tax revenue, the government plans to increase expansionary fiscal spending to boost the number of jobs, revitalize the economy, and improve the livelihoods of the public.
The lion's share of next year's budget, around $146.3 billion, is to be injected into boosting the health, welfare, and labor sectors, while nearly $64 billion is set aside for the education sector. The ministry has also increased the amount of state research and development for future core technologies, as well as boosting the platform economy, an ecosystem which depends on the internet, computation, and data. That's been raised to $18.4 billion, up more than $500 million from this year. The Ministry of Trade and Industry and Energy says it plans to increase its budget to around $7 billion next year, nearly 12% more than its budget for this year. This as the ministry is seeking to effectively deal with trade protectionist measures, convert South Korea to safe and clean energy, and strengthen investments for sectors related to innovative growth. The budget proposal is to be submitted to the National Assembly later this week for approval. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Staying with spending plans for next year, a significant portion of the budget will be injected to the military. It marks this decade's biggest spike in the amount allocated for national defense. Park Ji-won outlines what positive changes the funding could bring.
The Moon Jae-in administration has decided to allocate about $42 billion next year on the nation's defense budget. It is a whopping 8.2% increase from the previous year. This marks the highest increase rate on the nation's defense budget since 2008, and almost a double of the average annual increase rate of 4.4% seen from 2010 to 2017. The government expects to spend over 13% more than the previous year on developing and improving defense capabilities, such as the acquisition of state-of-the-art weaponry like aircraft and naval destroyers. Included in this category are some $4.5 billion the government expects to spend on establishing its so-called three-axis system, or the South's key three-part military strategy system to counter any North Korean threats, namely the Kill Chain Preemptive Strike System, the Korean Air and Missile Defense System, and the Korea Massive Punishment and Retaliation Strategy. A Defense Ministry official told Arirang News that next year's budget for the establishment of the 3-axis system has also increased by more than 16.4% year-on-year. The Defense Ministry explains that the increase on defense budget has been outlined to support the Moon administration's defense reform initiative, which aims to modernize and strengthen the nation's military capabilities with active investment in the latest technologies. The budget plan will be submitted to the National Assembly this Friday for parliamentary deliberation. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
The Unification Ministry also unveiled its budget plan for next year. Less will be set aside for humanitarian aid, while spending for inter-Korean economic cooperation is raised by almost 50%, reflecting the willingness to view Pyongyang as an economic partner rather than an aid beneficiary. Oh Jung-hee explains further.
South Korea plans to spend more next year on inter-Korean cooperation in an effort to boost exchanges with North Korea as agreed at their historic summit in April. On Tuesday, Seoul's Unification Ministry revealed its spending blueprint for 2019. The budget for the Inter-Korean Cooperation Fund rose by 14% from this year to stand at 1.1 trillion won, or roughly $1 billion. And among various categories within the fund, Seoul plans to give the biggest boost to economic cooperation at over 46%. Seoul will be putting more into grants and loans for economic projects mainly related to railway and road connections and forestation. The numbers are subject to change as discussions continue with North Korea on these projects, but regardless, the government says the projects will be carried out in a way that does not violate international sanctions and in step with North Korea's denuclearization. South Korea has also raised its budget for families separated by the Korean War by nearly threefold. That, considering Seoul and Pyongyang could hold more family reunions next year and even enable the families to visit their hometowns on the other side of the border. Meanwhile, Seoul is cutting down on funds for humanitarian aid and plans to reduce its food assistance for North Korea to 1/3 of the current figure. South Korea says it now sees North Korea as an economic partner to work with rather than a subject to help. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in plans to push ahead with his administration's key economic initiatives. While speaking to his aides, the South Korean leader appeared adamant on not abandoning any of the policy, while highlighting the importance of lending an attentive ear to criticisms. Shin Se-min shares with us his remarks.
The backdrop of the government's proposed 2019 budget, President Moon Jae-in's reluctance to drop any of the administration's key growth initiatives. Speaking to a room full of his aides during a weekly cabinet meeting, President Moon stood firmly by the administration's three leading economic policies: income-led growth, innovative growth, and the Fair Competition Initiative, which he said should all move forward as one package.
그 패러다임에서 벗어나 사람 중심 경제라는 새로운 패러다임으로 위기에 빠진 우리 경제를 되살려야 하는 것이 우리 정부가 떠안은 시대적 사명입니다. 그런 사명감으로 정부는 우리의 경제정책 기조를 자신 있게 흔들림 없이 추진해 주기 바랍니다.
President Moon said the new paradigm is a people-centered economy. And those remarks come amid concerns of a possible economic slowdown combined with a recent eye-watering jobs report and numbers indicating that the income gap is getting wider. Critics have blamed the income-led growth strategy for burdening small and mid-sized businesses with this year's minimum wage hike of over 16% and another one next year of over 10%. And to that, the president said the higher minimum wage is only part of many other plans to raise household incomes, but explained that he is open to making improvements where the need arises.
물론 우리의 경제정책 기조를 실현하기 위한 정책 수단들을 더 다양하게 모색하고 부족한 점이 있다면 그 사실을 겸허하게 받아들이면서 보완 대책을 마련하는 노력을 게을리하지 말아야 할 것입니다.
Despite the depressing economic indicators and harsh criticism of the policy, President Moon is adamant that his plan to revive the country's economy would soon boost the income of both workers and households, ultimately setting the foundation for income-led growth. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
In light of poor economic data, the government's policies have been subject to harsh criticism at the National Assembly. Today, opposition lawmakers call for an all-out revision, while the ruling party said patience is needed for the measures to bear fruit. Kim Min-ji has the highlights from the parliamentary session to question Cheongwade officials.
Officials from South Korea's presidential office were in the hot seat for questioning at the National Assembly on Tuesday as rival lawmakers locked horns over the government's signature income-led growth policies. Opposition parties criticized the policies, stressing the need for a revision or even a change in direction, as recent economic data have been dismal. They said the money pumped in hasn't translated into quality job growth, and the livelihoods of low-income households have gotten worse.
The government's policies are aimed at increasing the income of low-income households and spurring investment and job creation at companies. But you do admit that it's not working, don't you?
Our government is trying to ease the polarization issue by adopting the income-led growth policy. There are parts that have gotten better and areas that need improvement.
However, the ruling Democratic Party of Korea defended the policies, saying the matter is something that needs to be dealt with patience, adding that they can't blame the policies when the administration has only been in office for just over a year. Rather, they said the government's initiative should be seen as a long-term plan and more about reforming the country's economic fundamentals.
The way I see it, this income-led growth strategy is aimed at a much-needed structural reform of the Korean economy. Previous administrations have tried to do it, and so are we. It's not something rival parties should be bickering over.
The policies are aimed at boosting domestic demand. What we are pushing for is a shift in economic paradigm. We are not implementing policies for short-term economy revitalization or temporary job growth.
When asked whether the presidential office has any plans to scrap its controversial special activity funds, the presidential chief of staff said that it's being cut over 30% on year, and the remaining portion is a must-need budget for the president's diplomatic and security agendas. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
We're learning that Seoul's top intel agency reported the cases on imports of North Korean coal to the Presidential Security Office last October. A recent probe revealed that 3 local firms imported the regime's products from Russia in apparent violation of UN resolutions and sanctions, raising questions whether South Korea was properly implementing the punitive measures on Pyongyang. The chief of the National Intelligence Service informed a parliamentary panel regarding the matter today, and lawmakers quoted him as saying he brought up the issue, though not directly to the president. On the planned opening of an inter-Korean liaison office in the border city of Kaesong, the agency's head said he doesn't see it as a violation of UN sanctions, adding that its purpose is to step up communication between the two sides. Many expressed concerns as Mike Pompeo's visit to Pyongyang was abruptly canceled that it could prompt a delay in the scheduled inter-Korean summit set for September. The nation's top office responded. Its spokesperson said the meeting would go ahead regardless and stressed the greater importance of holding that event, hinting at recent stumbling blocks and a lack of working-level talks. The presidential security advisor spoke to lawmakers at the National Assembly's House Steering Committee regarding the matter as well. Jung Yu-yong explained that though the top diplomat's trip was canceled, Pyongyang and Washington displayed will to continue dialogue, and that the talks between the two sides is expected to resume soon. The U.S. once again stressed its commitment to the full and verified denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. According to its State Department, Seoul and Washington reaffirmed the sentiment on Monday. Kim Yo-sun updates us on the latest.
The top diplomats of South Korea and the U.S. have reaffirmed their commitment to the goal of achieving North Korea's fully verified denuclearization. The U.S. State Department issued a press release on Monday that said Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and South Korean Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa spoke over the phone to discuss the next steps of engagement towards Pyongyang. The diplomats also pledged to coordinate closely and share the same view that pressure must continue until North Korea denuclearizes.
The State Department urged Pyongyang to keep its promise of denuclearization as committed to by its leader Kim Jong-un during the Singapore summit in June. Explaining that Washington and its allies will be focused on achieving the North's denuclearization, the State Department said it has nothing to add on Pompeo's canceled visit to Pyongyang as of now. While Pompeo's fourth visit to Pyongyang was scheduled, President Trump called it off last Friday. Taking to Twitter, President Trump said he didn't see sufficient progress being made on the Korean Peninsula regarding the North's denuclearization, but he wished Kim Jong-un well. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
Now, many are curious as to what prompted President Donald Trump to pull Mike Pompeo back from another visit to Pyongyang. The Washington Post revealed an uncooperative letter from the Hermit Kingdom may have something to do with that decision. EG1 has the full story.
President Donald Trump's decision to call off his Secretary of State's fourth visit to North Korea seems to have been prompted by a letter from Pyongyang. An opinion piece in the Washington Post Monday said the decision to cancel Pompeo's trip came just hours after the secretary received a secret letter last Friday from North Korea's vice chairman of the Workers' Party Central Committee, Kim Young-chul. The article cited two senior White House officials as saying the letter was belligerent enough that President Trump and Secretary Pompeo were convinced the planned visit would not be successful. Trump tweeted that the trip was canceled because of a lack of progress on the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. The article in the Post said the letter was in response to the latest one from Trump, in which he urged North Korea to take more concrete actions on denuclearization and warned against backsliding. While the officials declined to say how North Korea delivered the letter, the article said that North Korea has been increasingly using its UN mission. It also says Secretary Pompeo's fourth visit to Pyongyang slated for this week was to negotiate a step-for-step deal. The regime has been asking the U.S. to declare an end to the Korean War, while the Trump administration has been asking Pyongyang for a declaration of its nuclear and missile programs and assets. But despite the historic North Korea-U.S. summit in June and the follow-up meetings, there has been no significant progress made on denuclearizing. And Trump acknowledged the lack of progress in these talks for the first time in that tweet. The ball has now been tossed to North Korea, and many say the regime's next move could result in even more sanctions if it doesn't satisfy President Trump. 이지원, Arirang News.
Concerns grew over the safety of BMW cars here in Korea due to the recent string of accidents involving its models. The government announced plans to unravel the exact cause of the blazes before the year is up. Kim Bo-kyun sheds light on the measures.
A high-ranking official from the Transport Ministry said the Korean government will work towards finding the exact cause behind BMW vehicles in Korea catching fire while on the road since last September. During a parliamentary hearing held on Tuesday, Kim Jong-yeol, the second vice minister of the Transport Ministry, said that the government will not just focus its investigation on the exhaust gas recirculation module, or EGR, but also look into other possible defects. The German automaker previously pointed at the EGR, a device used to reduce nitrogen oxide emissions from diesel engines, as the main cause of the recent fires. The vice minister said that the ministry will hold an extensive probe into the matter by also looking at the software and by testing the cars on the road. He also pledged to actively improve the current recall system and to strengthen punitive measures against manufacturers, especially when they're found concealing any defect on their product or delaying the recall process. The hearing was attended by lawmakers from the National Assembly's Land, Infrastructure and Transport Committee, government officials, car experts, and officials representing the German carmaker. At the beginning of the hearing, BMW Korea Chairman Kim Hyo-jun apologized before the public for causing anxiety and concern over the recent fires and said that the company is working in all aspects to prevent the recurrence of such problems. Regarding the cause of the vehicle blazes, Kim said that the fires were likely caused by the concurrent occurrence of multiple conditions in addition to the EGR problem, such as the driving speed and travel time of the vehicle. Kim Mo-kyun, Arirang News.
About a month ago, the Korean government banned the use of disposable cups in coffee shops and restaurants, and it appears the use of these plastic items was reduced drastically. A civic group named Korea Zero Waste Movement Network conducted on-site inspections of about 1,000 cafes and fast food chains last Wednesday and Thursday. 60% of stores did not use such cups at all. Before the government ban, the figure stood at under 30%. Plus, of all the cups used in those establishments, 81% were non-plastic. The group attributed the results to cooperation from consumers and the industry. Here in Korea, we've been experiencing some heavy downpours. Jeollanam-do province was the hardest hit last night and this morning. Advisories and warnings have been issued in other parts of the nation as well. Kim Da-mi has more on what some are comparing to a fall monsoon.
The most recent typhoon is long gone, but heavy rain is coming down nationwide. The southwestern city of Gwangju got up to 60 millimeters of rain an hour last night, causing drains to overflow in the city center and trees on the side of the street to fall over. There was a flood advisory issued for the city of Daejeon, where several buildings and homes were flooded, but that's now been lifted. Flooded roads also made for a chaotic morning commute. So what has caused this heavy rain? The North Pacific anticyclone, which had been destabilized by Typhoon Solek, is now stable again. On top of that, a tropical cyclone is sending water vapor up from the south, which meets up with cool air and causes these heavy downpours on the Korean peninsula. Some have called this phenomenon a fall monsoon and the start of autumn. But experts explain that this isn't a true fall monsoon because the North Pacific anticyclone has not disappeared yet. According to the Korean Meteorological Administration, the heavy rain will last until Thursday nationwide. After that, the air will feel pleasantly cooler, but there will be still days when it gets above 30 degrees Celsius, and we won't get to autumn until early September. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
Archery is still proving to be an Asian Games gold mine for South Korea. In multiple events, we're seeing a podium finish. National team athletes continue to test their mettle in other sporting disciplines as well, some coming out on top, others still in hot pursuit of greatness. Seo Bin has the highlights from Indonesia.
South Korea won a gold medal Tuesday, beating China on the cycling track in the women's team pursuit. For South Korean cyclist Na-eum, this was her third gold medal at this year's Asian Games. Her other two came from the individual road race and the time trial. More gold medals came from South Korea's archery team. In the men's compound archery, they beat India in a tie-breaking shoot-off. There were high hopes for Korea's archers, who missed out on gold when compound archery was added to the Asian Games 4 years ago. The South Korean women, as defending champions, also won gold in compound archery. Again, a win over India, 231 to 228. In the individual events, South Korean archer Kim Woo-jin won gold in the recurve archery event over his teammate Lee Woo-seok. The number 1 ranked Kim beat Lee 6 sets to 4. As for the women's recurve archery, Kang Chae-young won bronze, beating her opponent from Chinese Taipei 6 sets to 4. In women's table tennis team event, South Korea had to settle for a bronze medal. They couldn't get past China and lost 3 sets to 0. But it was their first medal in women's team table tennis at the Asian Games in 8 years. More events are lined up later in the day with the men's 110-meter hurdles final at 8:35 p.m. Korea time and the women's synchronized 10-meter platform diving at 8:35 p.m. Seo Bin, Arirang News.
Time to turn to Michelle Buck at the Weather Center for the updates you need. Michelle, heavy rain will be coming down on the metropolitan area and the west of Gangwon-do province tonight. It's raising the risk of flooding and other damages.
Well, Daniel, the northern parts of the peninsula has been getting a serious amount of rain today, and that's resulted in more places with some heavy rain alerts. Now, into the night, Seoul will get drenched with 40 millimeters of rain per hour, so make sure to be extra careful on the roads. And until tomorrow, Seoul, Gyeonggi-do, and Gangwon-do provinces will get up to about 150 millimeters, while up to 200 millimeters are expected for the northern Gyeonggi-do and the northwest of Gangwon-do province. And the central region is expected to keep getting buckets of rain tomorrow, while the southern regions are expecting only light showers and some hot temperatures. And because of the rain, it's much cooler at night in most of the country, with lows mostly between below 25 degrees Celsius rather. And the daytime highs for Seoul will be cooler, reaching up to 28 degrees, but the southern regions such as Daegu and Gyeongju will peak up to 33 and 34 degrees. That means heat wave alerts are going to be back, and this rain is expected to continue until Thursday for the central region, but a few days longer for the south. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
This is where we have to wrap things up. Thank you for watching. Depending on your time zone, good day or good night.